Elliot awakens to a world that isn't real. And then has to realize it's not so much the world that isn't real, but him. Look, all I'm saying is, I would hate to be the real Elliot when Darlene tells him everything that's happened over the past year. It's Mr. Robot. 412 and 413. Series finale. Hey everyone, D here, and welcome to this week's review of Mr. Robot, our final review of Mr. Robot. So, of course, spoilers coming your way, and as always, want to remind you about our quick jump index system. Right in the description below, we'll have this entire review titleized, time-stamped. You can jump to the end of the review first, you can watch the beginning last, you can watch this review in any order you like. And actually, before we get started, I do want to take a brief moment and let you know, even though we'll be talking about the last episode here tonight, next week I'm going to be over on Marc, my friend Marc's channel, Enchantment of Eternity. We'll be talking about the entire last season of Mr. Robot. That's going to be Sunday, December 29th, 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern, over on Enchantment of Eternity. I'll be sure to put a link in the description below and hopefully at the end of this video as well. So, yeah. Alright, so let's get into things this week. It is, of course, our big series finale. And yes, I did have a bit of concern that we took a hard left into deep sci-fi. Not that I'm totally against that, but a hard turn to make right when you're wrapping a series up. And I have to say, I am glad that that ended up not being the case, that we did stick with the whole psychological issue that the show has really based itself on. And it's not that it can't do sci-fi, and it's not like they hadn't talked about White Rose's plans, and was it time travel or dimensional shift, or whatever that it was. I just think really diving into that right as we're wrapping things up, bold choice. But of course that ended up not being the case. And overall, it's a way to wrap up the show. I mean, look, we're not talking, this isn't Lost type stuff, that it was all, you know, some final moment in heaven before they move on to the next level. Or like St. Elsewhere back in the day, where it was all a dream for an autistic boy staring into a snow globe with a hospital in it, you know. Nothing that bad. But the idea of it having been the whole time that we have seen this alternate personality in a way that we have never actually met Elliot over the whole series, that all of these adventures has been with this one side personality, I don't know, it's an interesting choice. I mean, in some ways we get to see what has affected the entire lifespan from an arc standpoint of this personality. It seems to have been formed very recently from the last discussion there with Krista, and that it put the real Elliot inside of this false world and sort of took over, and it was the real Elliot that's, or the personality, the mastermind personality, that started F Society, that reconnected with Darlene, that did the whole 5-9 hack, and that everything that we have seen, this whole arc of character, has been this, you know, alternate personality, not the real Elliot. And sometimes when you do this, it undercuts an emotional development of a character, but in some ways that doesn't apply here because we've never met the actual character, so we've only followed kind of, again, the emotional arc, the developmental arc of the Mastermind. The Mr. Robot series is not so much a story of Elliot, but a couple of his personalities taking over his body. And there is sort of an evolution and realization that this personality does. So, I mean, it does have an arc over the series. it's just kind of a weird one. I mean, and again, we are always questioning what is real and what isn't real inside of Mr. Robot. And certainly dealing with that the actual main character itself isn't entirely real is a hell of a choice to have, and maybe the most appropriate way to handle this. But it was definitely kind of an odd arc to follow. There were times where I wasn't caring, that I wasn't sure. It felt like the show had wrapped up and this was some sort of exercise in self-aggrandizement and what cool stuff and how can we kind of push this to the limit. And it's true, it had those, but there were also moments of great character, of realizations, of emotional moments where I got teared up and I got invested and I want to see what happened here. So how do you wrap up a show like this? I guess this is maybe the only way to do it. So yeah, as a finale, I think by the end of the 2 hours, I was very satisfied. I felt good. But the 2 hours to get from point A to point B really tossed me around from I'm interested to I really don't care how much longer is here. And so maybe not the most engaging way to wrap things up, but it is appropriately Mr. Robot. So, like much of the rest of the series, a lot of homages and references inside this episode. And I think, again, that the whole construction of starting things out is Elliot, the Elliot we know, ended up being the Mastermind, arrives in this world. And he's finally addressing us, hello friend, which was kind of a nice way. Again, we've got to wrap things up all appropriately. And I think they handled that kind of really well as he's starting to talk with us. And even then, he's kind of looking and regarding like he's getting used to us being there and he's not entirely trusting. It was kind of a cool, unsteady reintroduction to our relationship with Elliot. And from that point, we go straight into the Back to the Future references. They're walking through this town looking different than it does, nicer than how he is used to, very much like in Back to the Future. He walks in front of a clock tower the same way. Here, yeah, it's a park, the clock tower's in the background, it's not the driveway. But again, those same points, crossing the street, the car almost hitting him as he's distracted by the town. Even coming up to the corner cafe, where, of course, Marty McFly meets his father in there. But we take that point to shift across the street to see Mr. Robot, the shop. So, I mean, it was a perfect, again, Back to the Future. We're time traveling. We're in a new world that's familiar and yet different. And very much lean with all of the Back to the Future references that we've had throughout this show. And then even again, from there, following the father, down the street, across, watching what he is doing, was all very cool. I love the switch up, having the neighbor kid immediately recognize him, and just sort of ask what's up. Mom confronting him, and his whole discomfort at having physical attention given to him. And Mom gives the hug. He's all like, I am not right. It was a great way of really setting up his unsteadiness, even trying to tiptoe into this world. And of course, we're also seeing constantly is the other side of the day from where we saw the other Elliot. As he wakes up, it's the earthquake, and that is, of course, what we think is the two parallel worlds merging, and only one of them can exist at one time. But it's great how we have throughout all of this, here the phone call later on at Angela's, where we catch where he was calling the mom when he was at the restaurant with Dad and everything all from last episode. It's just, I always love when they manage to reconstruct a day from the alternate perspective. And again, also very Back to the Future. I started getting some Back to the Future 2 if he's overstepping his own self there. But again, just a great composition of having him feel out where it is that he exists. And when he does head over to Angela's place and he meets Philip, and Angela's mom there. We won't have to get into any of the specifics because it still has Moss' name and not Price, and therefore how can Philip be your mom, and are they married, and it was an affair. Anyway, those specifics don't end up being important at all because it's all manufactured. But it's very cool how in that moment Elliot starts to realize that he doesn't realize at this point that there is another him. He's accepting the fact that this world exists and that what he could have, what he's always wanted, could be here. And it's a great moment as he starts to realize, like, wow, this is this new world that I always hoped that would exist, and now it's here, right here, and I just have to walk into it. Again, not realizing there's another him in this world. And the fact that sort of as he starts to realize that, they drop that moment. The phone call comes, and it's himself on the phone. Again, we get the other earthquake. The glass gets broken. Angela's mom gets her hand, and that's why the bloody napkins and stuff were in the trash can last week. Again, I always love it when they give our reasonings here. But it's great because at this moment, now he's really caught with the problem is how does he exist in a world with another one of him? And how does he figure that out? Of course, he's Elliot, or the Mastermind. He hacks himself and discovers the drawings, it alternates him, and of course, ending up meeting himself. And this, of course, is when we go from kind of the fantasy Back to the Future to a little bit more into the horror realm. Of course, as we get this idea that the Elliot we know is a figment of this other Elliot's imagination, created as the superhero, the alternate version of himself that lived a more interesting life. And in a way it sort of makes sense because he says, you know, a superhero, only this superhero's powers would be, computer loose, cybersecurity expert by day, vigilante hacker at night, perfect superhero or story right there. And what does every hero need to have? Suffering. He's got to have a harsh life. Almost always loses at least one parent. Ostracized from society. A reason to fight back. So the idea of the Elliot that we know being a superhero imagination created identity makes a lot of sense. He has all of those requisite heroic backstory elements to his character, which I thought was kind of a cool thing. And then it's like, well, we got alternate universes, and was one created and is one facing it? At this point, it does get us to start questioning the aspect of this reality. There's too many odd overlays. And then the injury. This is where we go again from Back to the Future, fantasy sci-fi, into more of our Twilight Zone darkness. In fact, I believe there were Twilight Zone episodes or very similar ones, Outer Limits and such, that dealt with this same issue. You meet a doppelganger of yourself, you kill him, and take over his much better life. There was an old Outer Limits or something, or a newer one. Like an Elvis impersonator ends up going back in time, meets the real Elvis, knows everything about him. The real Elvis gets injured, and the impersonator has to take over his life and live the life of Elvis Presley. And we get kind of that same instance right here for Elliot, and we get a great musical change too, which is great when we get to those dark moments that, of course, the other Elliot injures himself. Is he dead? And now our Elliot has to step into his life, especially with the phone call from Angela. He can get everything that he wants. And then, he's not dead yet. I think you need to turn away here. Stepping into that darkness horror. Can you actually step into this guy's life? Which is a great return for Mr. Robot, telling him, what are you doing? No, you can't. And this, of course, is a point where everything starts to fall apart. Especially once Dom shows up. When he's got the crate right there and he asks for the ID. Elliot, this is Elliot Alderson. You're nothing like that, Elliot Alderson. This is something that's not real. Up until this point, you can kind of milk things out that maybe this is another reality. I think it's once Dom shows up that we definitely know that this is not just an alternate universe. There's definitely something else going on. And at that point, we get the subway, completely empty subway. That's not going to happen. He goes to Coney Island, boardwalk's empty, beach is totally empty. Again, more visions that this reality is no longer the case. And of course, when you have an entire wedding party with, Mr. Robot masks, should have had that easier, It's not, that's not an appropriate wedding party wear. So, that transition from horror into realizing everything isn't real, I think was beautifully done. It does get us in, and of course, then we get the real kind of backstory from Mr. Robot, how this world is something this personality created in order to trap Elliot, the real Elliot, in a world where all of his foes were friends, where everything was just that he was. Only difference, no Darlene. Because Darlene has always been Elliot's anchor. And if you don't have a Darlene here, it's easier for the real Elliot to get lost inside this imaginary recreated world, this loop of a world. I feel like my life is just an endless series of loops that I'm caught inside of a routine. And that ends up being the case. It's a repeating time, repeating loop to keep the real personality busy while the mastermind personality, the hacker vigilante, takes over. And from there, we get to our Suit of the Week for this week. And that is Back with Krista, where the Krista vision persona steps forward to give Elliot the reveal, finally, of who he is, that he is, in fact, a created personality. And not only do they, I love just sort of how they intro this in, not only just giving us the backstory of the creation of the personalities, that Elliot's jump out of the window created the first personality, Mr. Robot, the protector, the replacement for his own father. After that, he created the mother personality, the persecutor, the one that blamed Elliot, told Elliot was at fault for, was to blame for everything that happened to him. He was never good enough. After that, he creates the child personality, the younger Elliot personality, to represent the child that could have dealt with all the stressors that he did not. And then finally, more recently, we get the Mastermind, the hacker vigilante personality, who is the only Elliot that we have ever known. And montages are always a tough thing to do. They do them great inside this show. And the whole realization bit for Elliot there, done with montage, flashes throughout the entire show. How we have people saying, you aren't the Elliot I'm used to, you're acting differently, who are you, what's going on? All of these constant unfurls and shows and hints that we have never really been dealing with the same character everybody else knows. Everything that we have seen has been out of character for the real Elliot entity that is trapped and hidden inside this mind. It's just a beautiful way of realizing this. Also the idea that the real Krista didn't realize that she was talking with a personality the entire time and never spoke with the real Elliot. That was cool. But yeah, just sort of that whole montage bit. It was just great when you have so many back pieces that you could pull out to support this entire idea. It supports the thought that this was a plan from the beginning. That all of these hints were intentionally laid. And the way that Sam Esmail has crafted this show, I don't doubt it at all. It was just a great way of making us realize this is who we've seen the entire time, and that we've never met the real Elliot. And then, of course, at the end, we get the final conclusion of the arc of the Mastermind personality, as having fought against Krista, determined that he was going to not step out of the light. For those of you who have seen Split, you get the reference. That he was always going to be in charge. And once he wakes up, and we see that Zhang is dead and the meltdown was in fact averted, and he did survive because he was in a specially protected bunker. It's kind of reaching it a little bit, but okay. That suddenly, now that the Mastermind has achieved everything that he wanted, that he can't take this life from Elliot, that he has to step back. And the fact that it's that connection with Darlene, I think was sort of the great sweet moment, because even here Darlene didn't look quite like the Darlene that we've seen before. She's a little bit softer, she's a little more emotionally connected. I mean, she's had a hell of an arc too, but again, everything's been sort of coated over with this Mastermind personality. So it was just interesting to see this from Darlene, the fact that they did mention how important Darlene was to Elliot, that was always the ground and the connection. That they're able to have this moment. And that Darlene also realized, has always known that this has never been the real Elliot. It was just a great confession from her point, that she had stepped away and couldn't connect and couldn't protect and was wanting to come back but didn't know how to talk. It was her fault that they had separated out. It was just, there was just such vulnerability, I think, really established. It was a way for the two siblings to kind of reconnect in some ways, that this other personality, this Mastermind personality, allowed them to sort of reconnect. They, in a way, can both have that fear for the future. The Mastermind of what happens when I step back and I'm not in control anymore. And Darlene is, well, will the real Elliot, will I be able to have that same connection? It's just sort of a sweet, bitter moment of knowing what has to happen, but each realizing there's a little bit of loss that's going to come out of it. I thought it was a great way to sort of wrap up that arc and have, Mastermind accept the fact that it's time for him to move on. Oh, and just to sort of clear things up, because that last scene was actually really important to establish the truth of what's actually going on. Everything that we have seen did happen. F Society, the 5-9 hack, the death of Trenton and Mobley, and everyone, and Romero, and the heel, the death of Angela, the White Rose, the battle with the Dark Army. All of those things that we saw happened. Those were all real. It's simply Elliot who wasn't. That simply wasn't his actual personality. Again, all that we've ever seen from Elliot has been the Mastermind personality. We never met the real Elliot. Which is why at the end, where we get the first person perspective and Darlene steps forward and says, "Hello, Elliot." Hello, friend, hello, Elliot. Kind of perfect and appropriate. That is really the only time that there's some sort of acknowledgement. But we never see Elliot, we never get any introduction. It's never actually there. The scary part is, like I had said at the beginning, he's been trapped inside of this recursive loop imaginary world. The actual Elliot personality has been living this false life for the past year. Which means he doesn't know anything about the 5-9 hack. He doesn't know anything. I don't know how much he even knows about the Dark Army. The whole battle with White Rose, no. Tyrell, not at all. And he doesn't know that Angela's dead. When he went under, Angela was alive. And in this fake recursive world that the Mastermind built for him, she's about to marry Angela. He's going to wake up and realize Darlene's got to tell him that Angela's dead. That's going to suck for him. I mean, ow. Alright, just a couple of small things. One, of course, by the end, we had to have Mr. Roboto on this show. I mean, I think it's sort of perfect to wrap it all up at the very end. But yeah, Mr. Roboto by Styx. Kind of a classic. It's definitely an earworm. It gets in your head. For sure. But I'm glad they, like I said, had that in the show finally by the end. So, Fantasy Elliot's world, he's got a lot of trophies. Just trophies all over his room. I think it's sort of compensating. But did find that interesting how his room, of course, not where his real room should have been. That was a walk-in closet, so of course couldn't jump through the window. I mean, it was interesting because, again, part of it's like, oh, alternate reality, some small differences. But this being a psychological construct, why have the window that you had to jump out of to escape your abusive father that creates your first personality when this is a place where you're trying to hide from the very existence of those other personalities? Don't want those reminders. But you do want a lot of trophies. Alright, Christian Slater's face on all the population of Coney Island there, that was creepy. Just the boardwalk, every face, small little babies with Christian Slater's face and women and kids, and it's just disturbing. Yeah. The phone call from Angela, really tempting, really teasing. We can see where that would be an element that would keep the real Elliot inside of this world. All you have to do is want to be happy. Just make that choice to be happy. The world that you want, the reality you want, the future that you want is there. All you have to do is show up. Just flip the switch and choose to do it. See how that would be just so enticing. I mean, from a construct reality, it's perfect for, the real Elliot because it keeps him attached. But it also is the same thing that happened to the Mastermind personality of Elliot. Grabs onto him, makes sure that he wants to stay as well. Which, of course, really was the final motivation when other Elliot just conveniently has an earthquake and gets knocked out and killed to go ahead and take over that life. That was the one kind of trite-ish moment there. It's like, oh, of course the other Elliot's going to be damaged and hurt, killed, and you have to take over. But, like I said, tempting world. Okay, I guess technically we got the first indication that the world wasn't quite right. When Elliot's thinking is being heard by the other Elliot. The fact he addresses us and other Elliot, the real Elliot, hears him is like, what was that sound? That was definitely cool. I mean, again, the moment you can think there, well, they're the same person and the worlds are colliding and maybe there's some sort of connection with that. I still think the Dom one is where it really started falling apart, but that was definitely a cool moment of just, who are you talking to? I can hear your mind. It was just, it was a great way to see that world starting to crumble around Elliot. Now I know when Elliot woke up and Darlene was there in the hospital, that was all really happening in the news feed. We see again, meltdown narrowly averted, Prime Minister Zhang dead, This is the only part where, and I think maybe intentionally so, I'm hoping intentionally so, they still wanted to set the seeds, is this real or is this not? Because the fact that Elliot was protected in this specially secure, shielded bunker, office, that's sort of a little trait. Also that he's not being arrested considering that he was just found in this room next to dead Prime Minister Zhang inside a nearly melted down nuclear reactor. I mean, I would just think they would want more questions from him. The fact that he wasn't in handcuffs, there weren't police, that they seemed to have just thought that, oh yeah, you did it, you saved everyone. Did seem a little overly simplistic wrap up with the bow type right there. But again, go with it. I do think ultimately that was the actual reality that we were in. But yeah, maybe when Darlene says, hello, Elliot, he reaches up to say hi. Maybe then he's got handcuffs on and he's got some questions to answer. That's all I'm saying. But it's a small point. All right, well, I think that pretty much covers everything. I mean, again, I think by episode's end, everything was pretty well explained. I mean, You know, in some ways, I think actually these last two episodes were almost kind of a standalone. The real main flux of the episode versus Dark Army and White Rose and everything was already settled before this. This was just kind of the settling and resolution of the Mastermind Elliot personality, who's now retreated back to the brain with Mr. Robot and the mom and the young Elliot, and are watching the movie of Elliot's mind. They'll always be a part of him, even if they're not always in the forefront of his personality. You got to give the real Elliot a chance to live his life. But that does sort of wrap things up for us. Thank you so much for joining me with this review, with all of these reviews. Just tons of watchers, tons of new subscribers, great comments. You guys are always giving me stuff to think about with your thoughts and ideas and everything. Just, I really appreciate it, and just want to take this moment to just say thank you for subscribing, for watching these reviews, for sharing the video with your friends, and sharing your thoughts with me and everyone else. It's always just been a blast to see what you guys are thinking of, and the sort of little comments and discussions and interpretations of where this show could possibly be. It really has made this such a great experience, and I really appreciate you joining me along with this ride. Now, again, I do want to remind you, while we just covered this final episode with this review, we'll be talking with Marc over on Enchantment of Eternity next Sunday. That is December 29th, 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern. We'll be talking about the whole season of Mr. Robot and general thoughts, favorite moments, all of those things. Join us live in the chat. We'll answer as many questions as we possibly can and share all of your thoughts. So, I'll put a link in the description below, and if possible, right here at the end of the review on a little video link. So, we're going to wrap things up. Please, as always, if you enjoyed it, hit that like button. Thoughts, ideas, and comments, throw those down in the section below. What did you guys think of this episode? What did you think of this series? Was this an appropriate wrap-up? Did you find it satisfying? Did it leave you wanting? Did you think it was simplistic? Or did you think it was entirely appropriate for the way this show was? Let me know what you guys are thinking. Throw those down in the section below. You can always catch me on Twitter and Instagram. I am at Darren Jakes. Please subscribe. I know we're done here, but we've got The Mandalorian we're wrapping up too. We're going to be doing some specials next month. We've got the return of Walking Dead in February. We've got the final season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. in the summer. That's when it's coming back. You won't miss any of those reviews if you're a subscriber. Westworld Season 3 too. Don't let me forget that. You won't miss any of those if you're a subscriber. Do that by clicking this button right here. And I'll go ahead and throw up a couple of our latest reviews right here for you to check out. So, that's going to be it for me. I'm D, and I'm out of here. Catch you guys next time. Bye-bye.